Hello, my name is Margot Gineste from the UN Environment Cities Unit. Welcome to Unit 411 on the development process, where we will learn how to prepare the project with participatory design and community engagement. Establishing a green and thriving neighborhood requires a holistic approach. Investing in standalone technical solutions will not be enough. This subsection presents the first stage of a strategic development pathway that integrates net zero considerations along with livability and inclusiveness, with a special attention to vulnerable groups. By enabling communities, municipalities can foster behavioral change, enhance a sense of belonging, and increase safety and participation. These strategies contribute to SDG 5, gender equality, SDG 10, reduce inequalities, SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, and finally, SDG 13, Climate Action. This overview provides tools to establish a governance model, select a site, and engage stakeholders and the community in the planning process, with attention to the vulnerable populations. So first, let's jump to part 1, establishing a governance model and selecting a site. The preparation stage is crucial to create stakeholder dialogue. Addressing emissions while promoting quality of life is most effective if the city and relevant stakeholder agencies have formed an enabling environment with participatory planning. In the Royal Seaport project, for instance, in Stockholm, the City Development Administration established an administration and company-wide working groups to set sustainability targets for developers. These requirements were then reflected in land allocation and included in the development contracts. A governance model organizes the planning, operational, financing, risk management, and reporting processes. Determining factors are city powers, land ownership, financing arrangements, and infrastructure and services. Moreover, a lead agency should be established with the power to set the net zero agenda. For example, Waterfront Toronto is an independent corporation with a board representing all three levels of government. First, the City of Toronto, then the Province of Ontario, and finally the Government of Canada. This structure streamlined funding and approval, improved coordination, and defined a consistent vision for revitalization. To ensure effectiveness and encourage greener and more connected solutions, while nurturing specific small-scale projects that address immediate issues, policymakers need to facilitate connections and cross-sector collaborations both within and outside of neighborhoods. The feasibility of delivering a green and thriving neighborhood depends on the location and infrastructure. Some places will be better connected to transport and offer better opportunities for extending energy, water or sewage networks or digital infrastructure. Selecting a site within a wider planned development zone can enable access to finances and resources, skills and expertise that can accelerate the green and thriving neighborhood projects. Site selection comprises two main steps. First, decision makers should establish the selection criteria, considering the neighborhood's contextual features such as scale, housing type and construction, location, acquisition or lease costs, zoning, and community acceptance. Then, potential collateral effects such as gentrification and displacement brought by new redevelopments should be considered. Policies like rent control should be in place to shield vulnerable groups. An example is Flaghusen, which city planners a chance to make the Western Harbour in Malmö a more diverse neighborhood. Now that we covered part 1, let's move on to part 2, engaging stakeholders and the community. Developing a green and thriving neighborhood requires multiple stakeholders to collaborate around a shared vision. Public authorities encompass local municipalities, which play a crucial role in leading and developing a project, and the national government, which may own and operate, regulate, or fund infrastructure. Stakeholders belonging to the private sector include the private developers, who make decisions about the way the land is developed, and construction companies, which influence material choices and construction methods. Moreover, utility providers of energy, water, and ITC services to the neighborhood, and local businesses, which help reducing emissions through the services they provide, or stakeholders to be engaged. Engaging community groups and residents helps accounting for socio-economic needs and issues, while associating NGOs in the process can help retrieving funding, capacity, and knowledge. In a design charrette, professionals, officials, citizens, and stakeholders knit the pieces of the neighborhood jointly. In this holistic process, sustainable design emerges from the interaction of social, ecological, and economic variables through a collaborative and creative activity. An interdisciplinary team, typically consisting of planners, citizens, including the participation of women and underrepresented groups, or city officials, architects, transportation engineers, parks and recreation officials, etc., creates together a design and implementation plan for a project. A successful design charrette has the following characteristics. First, design with everyone. A good charrette is a collaborative problem-solving design exercise to which the community should participate. Then, start with a blank sheet. The blank sheet expresses both possibility and challenge. It is important as a symbol of community empowerment. Third, build from the policy base. Charrettes must be firmly grounded into existing policies. Fourth, provide just enough information. The key is to provide just enough data and no more. Too much information could generate decision paralysis. And finally, talk, create schematics, draw. Participants should initially talk about their ideas, gradually move to schematics, and finally draw out their vision. Participatory budgeting is a process of democratic deliberation and decision-making to decide how to allocate a public budget. It makes public budget more equitable and effective, involving those left out of traditional methods of public engagements, such as low-income residents, non-citizens, and youth. It has been increasingly adopted by cities, including Madrid, Seoul, Delhi, Taipei, Bogota, New York, and Paris. Now, let's move on to the third and final part of our presentation, engaging women and vulnerable populations. Both vulnerable and marginalized groups have difficulties that need to be considered when planning and designing a green and thriving neighborhood. The COVID-19 pandemic, climate change, and extreme weather further exacerbate disadvantages of fragile groups. Engaging vulnerable populations involves exploring the experiences and uses of the neighborhood from the perspective of all citizens, and promoting equity through more inclusive economic and social development. An interesting example is the intervention along the Sringeri Road in Chennai. The quick and cost-effective initiative was largely community-driven. It was aimed at enhancing the personal safety of the neighborhood, primarily for women and children. The current built environment, combined with gender inequities, tends to reflect traditional gender roles and gender division of labor and even endangers women, girls, and gender minorities of all ages and abilities. Ensuring a safe and equitable environment for all relies on 6 axes. First, access. Using services and spaces in the public realm, free from constraints and barriers. Then, mobility. Moving around the city safely, easily, and affordably. Third, safety and freedom from violence, meaning being free from real and perceived danger in public and private spheres. Fourth, health and hygiene. Leading an active lifestyle that is free from health risk in the built environment. Fifth, climate resilience, meaning being able to prepare for, respond to, and cope with the immediate and long-term effects of disaster. And finally, security of tenure, accessing and owning land and housing to live, work, and build wealth and agency. Other considerations while planning for vulnerable groups include the following aspects. First, high density and mixed use with short distances to social services, public infrastructures, transit and economic opportunities facilitates fragile groups' income generation. Also, small neighborhood centers where public spaces are combined with key public and social services and supply of basic goods promotes social cohesion and increases safety for vulnerable population. Public transportation also improves access for women and people of all ages and abilities. And finally, Diverse housing typologies, tenure systems, and layouts ensure people with different lifestyles, household setups, and financial capacities have equitable access to quality housing. An example is the work of UN Habitat, which helped launch an exclusive promenade for women, girls, and families in Khan Yunis, state of Palestine. The new promenade provides a comfortable space where more than 200,000 women and girls can easily and safely exercise their rights to the city. Moving forward, achieving gender-inclusive goals requires involvement of women, girls, and sexual and gender minorities, and integration through a cross-cutting approach that centers on gender. A universal approach meeting the needs of women, girls, and gender minorities builds upon increased knowledge on gender equity and grows the capacity and influence of underrepresented groups. Commitment of all stakeholders is key in ensuring financial support. Within informal settlements, women and girls are at disadvantage, often facing insecure tenure, violence, poverty, severe hygiene and health challenges, and lack of agency in public life. Planning should consider interdependencies with surrounding formal areas, their economic and their gendered aspects. Planning should also avoid relocations, which tend to break up communities and destroy the social network women depend on to balance paid and care work, like in this integrated life-work area in Dharavi, Mumbai. Upgrading access to economic opportunity, plans for improved and safer footpath, and locates public transportation nodes within or in immediate proximity of low-income settlements. Gender-inclusive planning in low-income communities emphasizes the upgrading of buildings and amenities that facilitate and institutionalize women informal economic activities. It upgrades access to and affordability of water, sanitation, energy, and other basic services so that informal businesses can run smoothly and profitably. Then, it prioritizes mixed-use zoning to promote home-based and other informal activity, and to improve access to essential services and amenities for women. Finally, it develops plans to avoid isolation or segregation of the settlement from the wider city, which disproportionately affects women's economic and social well-being. We covered all three parts of this unit and will now move on to the conclusion. I would like to conclude this unit with 4 key takeaways. First, targeting net zero and promoting quality of life will be most achievable if the city and relevant local government agencies involve the community in the planning process. The planning and design process should address the residents' needs and expectations, acknowledge diversity, and establish trust between institutions and citizens. Third, the community can be empowered with design charrettes, participatory budgeting, and participatory mapping. And finally, women, vulnerable populations, and marginalized groups have disadvantages that need to be resolved when planning and designing neighborhoods. Thank you for your attention.